Hello, and welcome back to another Power of the Parenting conversation with. Today, I am being joined by the one and only Jess Heagren, who, if you don't know who Jess is, I'm guessing you probably haven't surfaced on LinkedIn this year, because Jess, I think I'm fair in saying you've gone viral a couple of times now, with the introduction of, can we call it your fifth baby, the report?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, I suppose it is.
um,
I always said I'd only have four, but hey.
maybe we can talk about what was more painful, the report or childbirth. Um, but you are the founder and author of the Careers After Babies report, which has been making huge waves in an incredibly insightful and practical way this year. I know I've used it. I've used it with my clients. I've kind of gone, look at this, look at these numbers quite a lot. And it gets me very excited. So I'm absolutely thrilled that we're finally chatting today. You are also a parent. You are a mum of four. You talk lots publicly about how you manage that as a family with your husband as well, and kind of that fluctuation in terms of time and focus and all that kind of stuff. So that may even come up today. But thank you for joining me.
No, thank you for having me. I'm absolutely delighted to be here. And same with you. I've seen you, known of you for years. So it's lovely to be talking properly at last.
So I mean, it would be remiss of us not to start by talking about the report because we're filming this in December 2023, so it's coming up to its first birthday. And some of those stats are massive. Like there's a huge amount in there, and behind those stats are obviously all of those real people that you listened to so many stories and gathered so much data. Was there anything for you, and you probably had an idea of the size of the problem before you went into that report gathering, was there anything that surprised you that came out of the report?
I think the first surprise was, like you say, when you think you understand the scale of the issue. So I knew what happened to me, and I knew what had happened to my friends, and you see it happen to your sister, or whoever it might be. But then I'd never kind of been able to find the data that told the story that I saw happening, which is kind of where it came from. So when I put that survey out for the first time, I thought maybe like 100 people will come back. But in less than 2 weeks, I think it was over 800 women came back, which I guess tells you a couple of things. So the first one was the desire to be heard. And, the amount of women that were out there to say, this is not okay, this is what happened. So that was sort of my first surprise. The second surprise was when I was reading through all the data, and I just kept on crying, which I know sounds not funny, but crying because just how many of us are so unhappy with what's happened, and how many of us want to keep that professional side of ourselves going but aren't allowed to. And one of the things I find the most frustrating is when I'm not able to do the things that I want to do. That's the thing that kind of really gets me going, and the sense of that coming through in almost every single person's story was just palpable. So I think that was the thing that sort of spurred me on to write it. I blocked out 6 weeks, I think it was last year, until my husband eventually said, right, I'll do all of the school runs and everything for a week if you just get this bloody report done. So that's what led to it eventually being published. But in terms of the stats themselves, so there's that 98% of women wanting to go back to work is the killer one for me. And actually, when you combine that, there's a stat out there in the ONS data that says 74% of families in the UK need both parents to work. So actually, this isn't just I want to go back to work because, I think it might be nice. It's I need to go back to work to support my family and to carry on living, and then also to have that sense of personal and professional fulfillment. It's and yet we're living in a world where we're not allowing that to happen, which seems ridiculous, because at the same time organizations are talking about talent shortages and gender disparity at leadership and gender pay gaps, and I'm just a bit like, why do we not see that this is problem A is causing problem B? No, that's just my simplistic view of the world.
No, I think that there's a lot of there's a lot of dots to join that are really quite low hanging fruit, and really quite obvious dots to join. But it sometimes, and obviously childcare in the UK is a massive challenge, to be polite. And I know that that is obviously something that is a root cause of some of this, or maybe a lot of it. But it isn't just that, is it? It's a lot of the, like you've just shared some of those examples. There's some of those conversations happening in organizations, that some of the attitudes and some of the narratives that parents are facing, either when they return to work or further down the line, where like we've got over the return, we've figured out a new routine, and still I'm still facing challenges, or I'm still being passed over for progression opportunities or development, or that, you know, I'm still known as the part-timer. Oh, drives me insane. So it's quite wild, really, that some of the conversations that we are having, and it is 2023, but we can't just keep saying that over and over again, can we? Yes, it's wild that we're having them in 2023, but like, the so what are we going to do about it then? Because that talent shortage is there's a very real, visceral reason that organizations need to face into this, isn't there? We're talking big ticket commercials here.
Yeah, absolutely. But just massive opportunity. So I guess the starting point on this is that 85% of women leave the full-time workforce within 3 years of having kids. So that's kind of our headline, the headline finding, I suppose. If you then say, well, most organizations aren't offering part-time jobs, well, then that void is absolutely massive. And if you look in the report, there's the exact numbers on kind of, you know, hundreds of thousands losing out every single year. But that excuse me, sorry, that talent void is both kind of obvious and there, and it's absolutely vast. So you then say the other thing is the 85% of women will be mums by the time they're 45. So this is the other one that comes up for me time and time again. So there is just under half of the working population are going to be impacted by this. You know, it's not I always say to organizations, if you're gonna look at one thing, surely something that's going, and it's not just the 50% either, because it's obviously all of the dads as well. So if you're going to look at something that impacts the majority of your people, you know, this parenting, caring touches every different facet. You know, we talk about intersectionality, it literally touches absolutely everybody, doesn't it? So why wouldn't you be looking at it? And then the way how, you know, the how you look at it and how you start to tackle some of these things is obviously something you and I absolutely dedicate our lives to doing. I guess what I've tried to do with Careers After Babies is give that a structure overall to say, right, we know what a lot of the problems are, and I know we'll probably talk about this more, but we know there are different ways that we can look at it, different ways that we can cut it up. The way that we've chosen to do that is to look at the sort of policy, process and practice elements, because I think that's a way, drawing on sort of my experience in strategy and operations and that type of thing, that's a way that I can cut it, that I can actually understand it and digest it as an organization. I can look at it and think, right, okay, I know what to do with that, because there's sort of a framework around it.
Yeah. Which leads me very nicely onto my next question, which is specifically about that kind of triangle of policy, process and practice, because and I said this before we hit record, you and I are very aligned on policy and the fact that they are important, but great, even market leading gold stamped policy will not save you from shit line management and leadership. Pretty sure I can swear. I think it's okay. And it could definitely have been a worse swear. So, because often that's the conversation I'll end up having with people. Well, I don't understand why this is going wrong, because we've got this amazing policy and people just aren't using it. I'm like, no. They are using it, but they're also saying these 10 things that they absolutely shouldn't be saying to people, let alone thinking them. Or it's very inconsistent, and then sometimes I find that people operate in an extreme where they're like, well, everything's got to be consistent, then everybody's got to have exactly the same treatment. Like, no, there's a scale, because actually what we do for this person A, is probably going to need to be different to person B, because they're very different family setups, they're very different people. So it's almost like I've got this safety blanket of a policy, therefore everything's going to be okay. And it's very misguided, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, so talk to me a little bit more about and I guess whether it might be advice that you give to organizations, or whatever what train of thought do you go down when you see that policy process practice?
So it's the first thing organisations will say to me. So since I published the report, I've had probably about 200 organisations get in touch, which is kind of what inspired the creation of Careers After Babies accreditation. So in interviewing them and saying, what works, what doesn't, because there was a whole range of organisations in there. Obviously, some brilliant ones and some not so brilliant ones from a working parent perspective. But I guess the common attribute is the desire to be better. The first thing, and you'll know this, the first thing anyone tells you about is their policy. And I'm always a bit like, yeah. Okay, cool. You've got the policy, that's fine. Glad you've thought about it. But what about X, Y, and Z? And I guess this comes from, again, you would have heard this so often from all of your friends and every woman that you work with who says, oh, I was lucky because I had a good line manager. And that's my, that's the thing that makes me come to my office and sit at my laptop for hours on end each day, because that's not a good enough answer. And no organization should be okay with somebody saying that. So like you say, we can have a bit of paper that tells somebody how to do something. Fundamentally, that bit of paper is going to tell them, number of weeks, how to calculate pay, maybe what entitlements they get for antenatal appointments, perhaps. But what it doesn't say is, when that person tells you they're pregnant, instead of slumping your shoulders and going, oh, I'm going to have to hire someone, and can you go and pick up the phone to HR to find out what we do next? How that is the very first chip away at someone's engagement and happiness in their job. Actually, the reaction of you saying, oh, amazing news, I'm so pleased for you, wow, how exciting that you're growing your family. I'm going to go, I don't know exactly what to do right now, but I'm going to go away, I'm going to find out, and I'm going to come back to you in a couple of hours or later this afternoon, and we're going to work through this together. The person on the receiving end of that, they're either someone who goes, oh my God, I've been cast out already, and they're talking about replacing me and they no longer want me, or they're in a place of, oh, they're really pleased, I'm still part of the team, I'm still, engaged, I'm still loved, I'm still nurtured. And the way when we talk about policy, process and practice, that most of the stuff and most of the difference in behavior is around that practice. And that's just kind of one tiny example. We have 7 success themes that I call them. So one of them is consistent nurture and support, one of them is empathetic leadership, senior leaders, parenting, loudly. All of each of these themes have kind of a policy, process and practice element to them. The majority of my proof points, apart from the policy ones, hit onto the practice, because it is all of those little stuff. And I always talk about I think what we do at the moment, particularly with women going on maternity, is a death by 1,000 cuts thing. And it starts from the second, sometimes even prior to that, if they've got miscarriages or need fertility treatment or they're looking at adoption, every little interaction with them is either a little chip away at their engagement and making their life more difficult, or it's an opportunity to engage them, remind them of their value to you, and to nurture them and tell them you want them to stay. And like you say, that goes from before all the way through leave, coming back, and then once they're actually in the organisation, with how easy or difficult you make someone's life. Another great example when they come back is whether as an organisation you make assumptions around what their new aspirations are for their careers. So are you the type of organisation that says, oh, do you know what, they're a bit busy having kids, so I'm not going to talk to them about this stuff? Or are you the type of organisation whose line managers always have that conversation within a month or 2 of them being back, saying, you might not be ready to talk about it now, but actually I'm thinking about your development, I'm thinking about how we continue to grow you as a person and help make your life easier, but also continue to think about your professional development and all of these other things.
And they're just not they're not standalone conversations either, are they? These there are kind of multiple points where we don't just have one conversation a week after somebody has returned, for example, and then like that's it, we're done, because actually our needs change, our aspirations change. Whether you've got children or not, you don't stay as this one kind of static person, do you? So the idea that one and done in terms of conversations is enough is just complete, yeah, it's not going to be, is it? I think one of the development conversation in particular always hits a chord with me, because I returned having had my eldest, who's 9 now. When I returned, or I should say, before I had her, I was like, on the succession plans, I was down for this development, that development, things have been invested in. And when I returned, I felt such a pressure to maintain that narrative, because I had seen people, I was in HR, I had seen people's careers be written off because they had a family. And I knew that I didn't want it right there and then, because I kind of looked at the level of progression was all about upwards in the organization that I worked in, which is, again, utter rubbish. It doesn't all look upwards at all. But at that point in my career, that's what I believed, and most people around me believed it as well. And I thought, if I open my mouth here and say, I don't want that next level up, I'm going to be stereotyped. I'm going to be written off. And I didn't have a safe environment. Luckily, I did within about 2 or 3 months, because I had a new line manager who was just one of the best people that I've ever worked for. Doesn't have children, and but from a human to human perspective, was an incredible line manager. And that actually, I found it very incongruous, the life that I lived for the first sort of 2-3 months of being back, and that's hard, isn't it? When you're figuring out a new routine, you're just who you are, getting yourself and somebody else ready for a nursery drop off or childminder or whatever. And then showing up and thinking, I want to do a really good job, but I'm also nervous as hell if somebody taps me on the shoulder and says, right then, let's talk about promotion. Because I'm thinking, I look at that level above and thought, there's no way in hell I want that lifestyle. You all look horrific. You all look like you just kind of burning the candle at both ends wasn't even a thing. It was just at one end, and it was going hell for leather. But then I did then think, I do still want to progress. I still want to do a really good job. And progression doesn't, it does look squiggly and all of those things. But to be able to articulate that conversation, what I really needed was a line manager who could sit and listen to me and think, we still see your potential regardless of what your family setup is. And of course, we'll have this conversation. It's not, you've got to be ready for it now, or it's not at all. But there's not a huge amount of comfort in grey areas sometimes. And that's very much what I was in. And the more I then share that story with people, and I often talk about it in like returner workshops, like, oh, that's me. That's what I'm worried about.
Yeah.
But it's just not always vocalized, is it?
No, and I think you make a really good point, and I was exactly the same. So I often talk about I was the only female member of an all-male board, and I'd been fast-tracked. I was 10 years younger than everyone else, and all of those things. So I went back, and I massively felt that pressure, combined with I know people talk about the that kind of self-transformation, but I feel like I literally went from career girl to mum, and I just couldn't find a way for the two to happily kind of coexist again. And it took me a really, really long time. In fact, you know what, I'd say it's only in the last couple of years, when I've been comfortable with the fact that I'm, no longer employed and working for myself and that type of thing, that I've kind of found that happy medium again. And so I've got a 9-year-old and my youngest is 2, so I've had 4 and probably gone through it every time. And you've made the most important point, in that everyone is different. So some women will go back to work and say, I don't know how they do it. They walk back in and they're just like, actually, no, this is still what I'm all about, and I know exactly who I am, and they just crack on, and that's great. And yes, they want to have those conversations. But I think for the majority of us, what we actually need is for someone to say, I'm here for you, and I've got your back, and I value you and I value your contribution, and I know you'll continue to do a cracking job, and I'm kind of here when you need me. But let's still have one eye on thinking about skills and what new skills you bring to the table. And just like you said, it doesn't necessarily have to be about promotion, but it is still about that. I think, oh God, I'm blurry. I think about that. I think that self-reflection almost kind of helps with the readjusting to actually think, well, what's this new version of me that, I used to be this person, and then for a few months I was this person, my whole world's turned upside down. What is the new version of me? And kind of helping come to terms with that. I feel like at the moment there's kind of this clash in that we come back to work generally feeling very unconfident and not knowing who we are, and then an organisation that says, oh, we don't quite know what to do with you, so we're just going to not talk about it at all, and stand back. And then you find lots of very unhappy women saying, like I spoke to one the other day, a very well-known brand, saying, I was promoted every 2 years, now I've been in the same role for 5 years and I feel very stagnant in it and I'm not challenged in it. Actually, that's really common. And she was there saying, well, I haven't prompted the conversation, and they haven't either. And you're a bit like, well, hang on a minute, why is that conversation not happening? Because surely this is as a line manager, as a good line manager, that is the type of conversation you have with every one of your team consistently. But this theme of consistency, I think, is our biggest challenge. And I don't actually, if you think about good line management, I don't think it's even just applying to maternity managers, working parents scenario. It's across the board. I have a big question in my mind as to whether we promote the right people into line management positions, or we've gone down, I imagine it was some sort of job family framework at some point that said, oh, well, all of the people who are good at doing what they do, well, you should make them managers of other people, when the reality is that's too often not the case. Someone can be an expert at something but a very poor line manager.
Yeah, I can immediately think of about 27 examples. I can give you names.
Maybe don't. No public shaming today.
One thing that I think we want to just touch on as well is just to share a little bit of reality as well. We both work for ourselves, but in an arena like this, it is completely common to have pushback when we are talking to organizations. Sometimes an organization kind of approached you, for example, and you still have that difficult conversation about, I have, if I'm completely honest, been on calls with people before where I've wanted to go, why the hell have you booked this conversation with me? Like, why are we here?
I do. Why did you get in touch?
I'm just not sure that we've really understood each other here. And by that, I mean, you've not understood what it is that I do, because it feels like, I don't know, I could probably write a book about some of those conversations. Maybe that's a collaboration for next year.
Reconciliation.
But I think it would be, again, something that people would love to hear about, just the realities of what are some of those pushbacks that you get, either when you're talking to an organisation or just with any sort of human, actually, because everybody's got an opinion when it comes to supporting parents.
The two most common ones. So there's the most obvious one that immediately jumps to mind is, oh, we really want to fix this, but we don't have any budget.
Mm-hmm. And
you say, okay, cool. So you're either, and I know you talk a lot about this on LinkedIn, so you're either talking to me because you want me to work for free, number one, which is obviously immensely frustrating because I'm a person with a big mortgage and 4 children and a business that I'm trying to grow. Or number two, I don't know, question mark, why are we having this conversation? What is it you're wanting out of this conversation, but you're kind of not willing to pay for it? So that I find massively, massively frustrating. And it extends beyond that. I have lots of conversations with employee resource groups when I'm either asked to speak with them, for them, or asked to do a piece of work, and actually you find out they're unfunded. So there's a big question mark for me about how committed an organisation is to making things better when they're not actually allocating any budget. That's probably my number one thing. My second one is, and I'd love your thoughts on this. So I did a talk recently that was for the Happiness Index. It happened at Google HQ. And I sent the video, you know, you have your mum friends. So I have my mum's friends that I hang out with on a Friday with our 2-year-olds, and it's really lovely. And I get to play at being stay-at-home mum for the day. And they will say, oh, we don't know what you do the rest of the week. So for me, kind of having that recording, it was a really good example to send it to them and say, oh, this is the type of thing that I do Monday to Thursday when I'm not coming for coffee. And I sent them this video, and one of them watched it with her husband sat next to her on the sofa, and he's the finance director for a big strategy consultancy. And at the end of it, he said to her, this is great. And yes, I accept that working mums want to work, but ultimately, isn't everyone replaceable? Yeah. And it's something I've been thinking about, grappling with, because fundamentally that's what you're up against. And when you're looking to make a change for a certain group within an organization, there are always the people outside who say, you know, this is too difficult, this is too challenging, why don't we just get new people?
I don't know if you actually do want my thoughts on this. There might be squares. I think so. I understand the grappling side of things actually for you, and why that would go through your head, I think, because I often, when I say about retaining talent, maybe you don't want to retain some of these people, but if you don't want to retain them just because they have had a family, that's wrong on about 76 different levels. And I think like it's fair enough. I think it's a state of, yes, absolutely, you are replaceable in the workplace. However, there are so many commercial reasons why you can't be churning people. Like you just can't. We know that the average cost to recruit in the UK is over £30,000. We know that there is a talent drain where every time you lose somebody, they are taking their skills elsewhere, because whether they go and set up by themselves, whether they go and find an employer who does want them, they will go elsewhere, because we have to make money. We don't live, you know, most of our audiences are not people who are able to financially kind of cushion themselves and not work. And for lots of them, they want to work even if they don't have to financially. So I think it's a very short-sighted view to think, well, yeah, I can just write this off because I can get somebody else. We've got to remember also, and you all know this better than anybody because of your background with the recruitment side of things, the labour market is choppy. Those talent pools are choppy, and you've got it is a job seekers market at the minute. And I know that it goes up and down and it fluctuates and it isn't always. But since 2020, the year, people are looking more at what's important to me. We are readdressing our individual definitions of success. If you find somebody, like, discretionary effort has gone down the pan. So if you find somebody who you've invested in, who comes with fresh perspectives, we know, talking to parents, the things that you see through different eyes when you have got a family is wild to me sometimes. The things that you think, God, yeah, how have I not thought of that before?
Yeah.
Like this isn't disposable talent. Might be replaceable, but are they people that you really want to say goodbye to? I would argue not. And if there is a real performance issue, fair enough. But 9 times out of 10, it's nothing to do with a performance issue.
No, you've obviously landed in exactly the same place I did, and all of the same arguments I make. I think I find it frustrating that anyone would hold that view, knowing what they know about the world right now, about people, about just the state of the world. Why, if you've invested in anyone in any capacity, would you then say, oh, it's fine, we'll go out and, you know, we'll get someone else? But time you factor in training, recruitment, you know, cultural fit, getting themselves up to speed, just all of the all of the logistics even around the thing of replacing someone, never mind the attitude and the loss of talent, what it says to the rest of your organization about people. You know, I think it's massively short-sighted, as you said, of anyone not to be thinking about that engagement. The question of why my employee happiness matters, I think, has never been more prevalent than it is now. And like you say, if you want the best out of people, then, you know, treating them in the right way, understanding them as humans and understanding what makes them tick and, you know, what keeps them there is just so important, isn't it? It blew my mind, but I was interested to see just hear what you had to say.
I think it would also make a lot of people in-house recruitment, or even, you know, agency-based people who are trying to attract newbies, very, very nervous, because you suddenly get that reputation of high attrition rates, because the minute you hit a certain age or the minute you hit a certain family status, you're done here. That can be a really big problem for somebody's attraction strategy.
Absolutely, yeah.
So will you be that replaceable? You individually might be replaceable, but who are you replacing them with? Because nobody's going to want to come and work for you.
Exactly. But I think that the interesting thing in that question for people like us and for HR directors, people directors who are trying to convince their board to do things differently, I think you've just given an absolutely, you know, cracking answer to. But it just goes to show how much we still need to demonstrate the business case. So for me, that it's always the hearts and minds piece, isn't it? And, you know, depending on who you're talking to. So actually, what's my business case for behaving differently? You know, how will this impact my actual stats, whether it is retention, engagement, you know, drop in recruitment costs, whatever those might be, combined with this is the experience for the individual, this is the effect that has on people around us, kind of seeing it. And it's one, you know, when you're talking to organizations, when I'm talking to them about the careers after babies framework, these are all of the things we're prompting them to think about, because I think part of our job is to help those people that do get it convince the ones that don't get it, and, you know, how you convert them on the right things. But yeah, that's been my biggest thinking point, I would say, around challenges over the last couple of months.
Well, let's kind of manage that imbalance out a little bit. So we've kind of ripped some shreds there, but also, what about the glimmers? So where are the good stuff? I see this word glimmers on social media, like the younger ones going, you know, I heard this phrase glimmers recently. I'm like, oh, okay.
When you say glimmers, I just think, so my 7-year-old's like really into these like plastic toys that I think are called glimmers with sparkles. Really? That's what it makes me think of.
Not those. It's okay. We're not going on a toy hunt. Okay, the good stuff, the things that are kind of spurring you on, whether it's been an interaction with an organization or a change in the narrative that you're starting to see come through. What's some of the stuff that's giving you hope?
So I guess the first thing was how much the report went viral. So you said about it being kind of all over LinkedIn this year, just absolutely blew my mind. It was genuinely unexpected. And I don't say this from a, you know, being funny about it. It was completely, utterly unexpected. The fact that it's gone all over the world. So I get people in Australia contact me, you know, people even in kind of Sweden, Germany, literally all over. So that's been incredible. The second part was where this whole business spawned from, which was the fact that probably about 150 to 200 organizations have got in touch with me to say, this isn't okay, what do we do about it? And that for me is a massive beacon of hope. So for all of the women that I'm sure get in touch with you, and the messages that I get on LinkedIn all the time saying my employer's done this, and, you know, I've lost my job because of X, Y, and Z, the thing that I can put my hand on my heart and say is there are good employers out there, and there are good organizations who want to employ working parents, keep working parents, and do the right thing by people. And I know that because so many of them got in touch, and so many of them helped me put the Careers After Babies blueprint for what good looks like together. The number of them that are going through the accreditation, the number of conversations that I've got ongoing, the number that still, you know, reach out every day, the number of organizations that invite me to come and talk to them. So there's an I Am Lucy story that I tell, which is basically about a lady who goes through actually very typical maternity experience, return to work, and her ongoing career progress, who ends up quitting, having the opportunity to tell that in front of people who might not necessarily normally listen. So Charlotte, we speak to lots of HRDs and that type of thing who get this stuff. Actually, I'm being invited in to talk to broader leadership teams where you might have, say, 7 or 8 guys sat in there who wouldn't normally listen to this, but actually when you're able to sit in front of them with the hard stats from a report like this, combined with some of the stories that you've heard, again, it goes back to that hearts and mind piece, actually, when somebody sat there going, oh my God, you know what, actually my wife went through this, or my daughter's been through this. And it's creating, I always call them like penny drop moments, but those things where you see somebody go, oh wow, and you open their eyes to something that they didn't really see before, but they are incentivized to take action on it. So those are my, when those things happen, I'm always really spurred on to think, actually, yeah, this is brilliant. How do we get in front of more people like that who wouldn't normally talk about this stuff, to say, we need to make change, we need to incite change.
Amazing. I love that. Thank you so much, Jess. I will pop some links in the notes so that people can come and find you. And I would heavily encourage anybody to go and connect or follow you on LinkedIn, because you post some amazing stuff. So I'll pop all of that in there. Is there anywhere in particular, like where's your preferred method of communication from people?
Always get in touch with me on LinkedIn, and then careersafterbabies.org. I'm still at the stage where I'm managing all of that. So if anyone gets in touch through there, then yeah, it'll be me. It'll reach me.
Amazing. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, and I really value all that you're doing, and feel like we're standing shoulder to shoulder. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Charlotte.
Take care.